True creepy cabin power outage stories. When the lights went out in isolated cabins, something else lit up. Look, let me ask you something. Have you ever found yourself alone in a place that was too quiet? Like your family's country house? Or that rural cabin where everyone goes to bed early? That farm where the only sound is the wind slipping through the cracks in the wood? And then, out of nowhere, the power goes out. Everything becomes absolutely black. And it's not normal darkness. It's that kind of darkness that feels alive. The kind that seems to know exactly where you are. And for some reason you can't explain, you feel you are not alone. You try to take a deep breath, try to tell yourself, I'm overreacting, it's just a blackout. But the truth? Darkness messes with us in a way nothing else does. It brings back things that stayed quiet until the light died. And today we're talking exactly about that. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about true creepy cabin power outage stories. When the lights went out in isolated cabins, something else came alive. If you're the kind of person who always tries to be rational, but still gets that presence feeling when you're alone in the dark, go ahead and hit subscribe. And drop a like if this video helps you understand why these things happen, and why maybe they aren't just coincidences. Here's the thing. There are scary stories people make up. But then there are the ones nobody wants to tell, because when the lights come back on, you realize it wasn't imagination. Tonight, you're going to hear real stories, and the psychology and spirituality behind them. And I promise you this, you'll never look at a blackout the same way again. The first story came from a guy named Daniel. He was the type everyone considers brave. Loved camping alone. Loved hiking. Loved silence. Until he spent a night in a cabin that, honestly, I don't think wanted him there. The cabin sat at the edge of a lake in rural Parana, the kind of place where, if the lights go out, you have nowhere to run. And that night, the weather forecast said storm. But Daniel? He thought, perfect, even better. Rain sounds relaxing. Except, the moment he stepped into the cabin, something felt off. First, the smell. It wasn't mold. It wasn't old wood. It was the smell of something recently extinguished, like a candle right after you blow it out. Warm, burnt wick. Still he stayed. The rain started soft. He made coffee, sat by the window, stared at the dark lake. And here's where it gets interesting. Daniel told me that while looking at the water, he felt, not that he was being watched, but that he was being measured, as if something was calculating his presence. And then, the lights go out. Not slowly. Not flickering. No warning. Just pitch black. He laughs. Grabs his phone. The screen barely lights up his own hand. And then it begins. Outside near the window he hears footsteps. Not human. Not animal. Drag steps. As if something was pulling its own weight. Nick, it was probably a branch. No. Because seconds later came a sound you cannot mistake. 3 sharp knocks on the window. Tuck, tuck, tuck. And the detail? The window was high. Very high. Nothing outside to climb on. No platform. No ledge. You're probably thinking, he panicked, right? No. Daniel was too proud. He decided to look. And when he approached the window, lightning flashed, just enough to reveal the silhouette outside. He described it as something very thin, very tall, bent at angles that bones aren't supposed to bend. And the face? He didn't see the face. The lightning vanished too fast. Then it knocked again. A 4th time. Harder. Hard enough to almost crack the wood. Daniel ran into the bedroom. Shut the door. Stayed there in absolute darkness, holding a knife he admitted he didn't even know how to use. And here's what most people don't realize. When we're in complete darkness, the human brain loses spatial reference. It activates ancient survival systems. You start to feel presence even when you don't see anything. It saved our ancestors. It terrifies us now. And that's exactly what happened. Because in that forced silence, he felt someone lean against the door. Not knocking, not trying to open it, just leaning, softly. Like someone placing their head against your chest to hear your heartbeat. He heard the wood creak. And then, the breathing. A slow, rasping breath, like air was passing through something that shouldn't be there. He told me that I can't explain it. The breathing didn't sound human. It sounded learned, like it was trying to imitate me. And here's where it gets interesting. Moments later, the sound stopped, the presence disappeared, and the lights came back on. But when the lights returned, Daniel noticed something else. The bedroom door was not closed. It was slightly open, and he was absolutely certain he had locked it. He walked into the hallway. Everything looked normal, nothing out of place, until he looked at the living room window. On the wood were scratch marks, 3 of them, each about 20 centimeters long, as if long fingers had dragged across it. Fresh marks, splinters still falling. Daniel left the cabin that same night, never returned, and he ended the story with a sentence that still echoes in my mind. Nick, when the light went out, that thing got happy. Here's the truth. When we're isolated, away from artificial light, the mind enters a primitive alert state. It amplifies sounds, distorts shadows, creates patterns we usually ignore. And science agrees on something most people don't like to admit. Our senses become sharper in darkness, including the sense of perceiving things that shouldn't be there. What Daniel experienced is common in remote places. The feeling of being watched, the dragging sounds, the imitating breathing. But this is where the spiritual part comes in. Old cabins, old wood, remote regions. They hold memory, not psychological memory. Presence. Places like that absorb stories, absorb pain, absorb intentions. And when the lights go out, these things search for movement. They search for warmth. They search for you. The second story came from a woman named Teresa. She and her husband had just bought a small cabin for weekend rest. Beautiful place, cold, isolated. The first week was perfect, until the storm came. Strong wind, heavy rain, and, of course, blackout. They light lanterns. Try the generator. Nothing. Try again. Nothing. The husband goes out the side door, frustrated, to try fixing it. Teresa stays inside, lit only by the weak flame of a candle. And this is where everything begins. She told me that the moment her husband stepped outside, she felt the cabin deflate, as if the air became dense, as if someone had filled the place with liquid silence. She tries a deep breath, but something inside her reacts, like it's saying, "Don't breathe too loud. He'll hear you." She tries to ignore it. Then the candle begins to fail. The flame trembles, stretches, and dies. The cabin goes dark. Not normal dark. Suffocating dark. Dark that feels like it touches your face. Then, from the corner of the cabin, she hears, like someone tapping a nail on the wall. Slow, rhythmic, patient, desperate. Teresa grabs her phone to use as a flashlight, and the phone shuts off. Battery at 70%. Dead. Gone. Then she notices the sound has changed. Not tech anymore. Now something closer. Wetter. More organic. Like something dragging its hand along the wall. And you might think this is psychological, but wait. The sound stopped behind her, on the kitchen wall, less than 2 meters away. She didn't dare look. Then her husband returns, opens the door. Generator lights up. The cabin fills with light. And Teresa collapses on the floor, shaking. Her husband asks what happened. She points to the wall, and there were long wet streaks, like fingers dragged across the wood. Except, the fingers were far too long, and there were 5 on top, and 2 below, like a hand with extra fingers. She never went back. You might be thinking, Nick, is this paranormal or psychological? The honest answer? Both. Because humans have 3 natural reactions to darkness. The mind creates patterns. The body activates ancient memories. The spiritual world becomes more perceptible. And here's what most people don't realize. Darkness doesn't create things. It reveals what was already there. When the lights go out in an isolated cabin, you lose reference, depth, distance, direction, psychological protection. Everything you thought you understood becomes instinct. And instinct, my friend, does not lie. These stories aren't meant to convince you of anything. They're meant to remind you of something. There are places that stay too quiet when the lights are on, and speak too loudly when they go out. If you've ever been through something like this, if you've ever felt a presence in the dark, if you've heard footsteps where no one should be, drop it in the comments. And if you want more true stories like these, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and hit the bell. 'Cause here, we turn on the light to understand what lives in the dark. See you in the next video. And remember, the light goes out for everyone, but what shows up is different for each person.